Once again, a blessed morning to all of you, and it's certainly a privilege to be sharing once again here in our Sunday school this, I would say, my series on poverty of nations, which of course have been taken from the book, just like what I've told you last time, by Wayne Grudem and Barry Asimows. Wayne Grudem, incidentally again, is the theologian, and Barry Asimows is the economist. And of course, the first time that I shared this message to you, it was last September of last year. Of course, you would remember, or you would know that several of our men in GBCLB are taking turns whenever Pastor Noel will be on his rest day. So our series would be putol-putol, luktaw, ligtang-ligtang. No? So it would come at different times. Maybe after one quarter, you'll see me again standing in front of you. I gave you the introduction last time about this particular topic, the poverty of nations. And just like what I've said, I'll repeat it again. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert on economics, but I'm one who is very much interested with poverty, particularly being a forester myself, who have witnessed so much appalling poverty in the uplands. And I'm using this particular book. I know this is available online as well. And I'd like to tell you that if ever you see the name Rick Warren in the foreword, you might be saying, why is Brother Ike using that book? Of course, this book doesn't talk about health and wealth and prosperity gospel as specified clearly, categorically by the authors themselves, Wayne Grudem and Barry Asimows. And of course, the focus of this book is not really having material prosperity, as I have explained earlier. And just like as a matter of review, just like what I've told you, I'm disturbed, I'm appalled by poverty. You might be asking about poverty in the Philippines when you have heard the other day that there was, and I'll show you in a while, that very rosy economic growth figure that we have had, which was in fact accordingly claimed and even being touted as the fastest since 1976. And of course, the palace was clapping their hands and of course attributing the growth accordingly to the present administration. But we should be appalled by what we see as poverty. I look at the figures, it's about 19 million accordingly, but in the uplands, we consider something like more than 25 million Filipinos in the uplands. And these are not Filipinos who are having their vacation houses in the uplands, just like in other countries, but these are the poorest of the poor. And as a matter of review, we looked at this last time. The topic is national in focus, so it's macro. So we will not be talking about poverty or addressing poverty on a micro level, say helping the small poor there, but it's really the national focus. So hindi natin pag-usapan, I'll just be switching back and forth to our local language, but of course I'm not sending out our foreign friends. Tulad kanina, may nakita po kaming nagtitinda. But we are not focusing on that small entrepreneur or seller out there, but we're talking about the national. And we have said that STEPS is within the nation, so it's national in scope. The solution is not simple. It's not just one solution. You just say, oh, let's solve the price of onions, that inflation, and everything will go on. All poverty will be removed. Distribute the wealth, and that's it. Poverty would be solved. It's not simple solution. In fact, in this particular book, you will find that there are 78 steps recommended by the authors, which spans legal, political, institutional, cultural, even spiritual solutions so that we can address poverty on a sustainable basis. So not a simple solution. We have said that last time. It's written for ordinary readers, not really economists, so this is not economic textbook, although leaders of nation accordingly would benefit from it. And I think when I read it, I think it's really very helpful for leaders, even on the local leaders, regional leaders, and more importantly, national leaders. It's also written for students, so it's good reference for students. And why don't economists agree on a solution to poverty? We have said that last time. They do agree on certain points, but not in all. And in major points, they do agree. Why should we help? We help the poor. We have emphasized that last time, that it's, as Christians, we are duty-bound to love our neighbors, especially those who are poor. In fact, we have our benevolence ministry in this church. And you would remember in our budget for 2023, and even in the previous years, benevolence is a major budget. In fact, we don't get bothered if we have some negative figures in our benevolence funds, because we really want to help, especially those who are needing help. And addressing poverty is the responsibility of leaders. And just like what I've mentioned earlier, material prosperity is just a secondary issue. There are major issues beyond just addressing these poverty issues. Okay, what shall we discuss today for this Sunday school? First is we'll answer what makes a country rich or poor, what are the parameters, so just simple economic parameters to define them. There will be other goals that have been suggested to address poverty, but what is really the goal to address poverty? That's the question for this Sunday school lesson. And of course, having a focus, a clear, defined, definite goal is important whenever we want to attain an objective, and in this case, addressing poverty. Third is we would look at the amazing process of creating value that did not exist before. And this would be part of that goal of creation of products and services. And we look at some examples of countries or nations that have become prosperous by producing more goods and services. And there would be this mention also of biblical support for why we should create more goods and services. And lastly, it will be a question to us, question to you: what goods and services can the Philippines create or produce? Okay, I think I've shown this slide to you last time when I was starting to present this lesson. It was also the news in September, back in September 2022, when the new administration was already saying that Philippines to become an upper middle income. That was according to the current president. And the World Bank defines what is the upper middle income economies. That means those with a gross national income of the range $4,096 to $12,695 per year. What is the Philippines GNI in 2021? It is $3,640. But that's on a per capita basis, meaning to say that the total national income was divided by the population of the country. So meaning to say that it doesn't mean that the richest Filipino, I don't know if that richest Filipino is in this room. Of course, we know it. That's not the richest Filipino is not in this room. Would have that kind of income. Some of you may have an income below this, or some of you may have a much higher income than this one, but this is the per capita income, and thus we are classified as a lower middle income. Of course, you may probably have seen this. Let me turn it off so that we can open this. Okay, you probably have seen this news. Oh, I have to turn. How do I turn that? It's not displaying in your case. Shift, mirror. Yeah, I remember. I have to mirror my display in that case. Sorry. Oh. That I didn't check earlier. Advance. Yo. Mirror. Where's the mirror? It's not supposed to. It's not detecting that. Is that Epson? There. Mirror. It's not. There you go. Found it. Okay, that's it. So that would display that news 7.6, the growth fastest. But according even to the NEDA Director General, Secretary Balisacan, was former Sherca Director, baka si Brother Glenn magiging NEDA Director in the future. Income is still low, and in fact, we know that this is the growth nationally, no? And if you would look at that same newspaper clip, you would find that there are some criticism. Why is it that they would say that there is this very high economic growth, but the price of sibuyas, onions still very high. Now it's onions coming up, maybe rice in a few days. Sugar is also, the price of sugar is going up, and all the economic problems and woes. That's really the main essence of this particular topic. Now I have to be shifting and have to shift now. Go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. Now, what makes a country rich or poor? The answer is that we measure them in economic terms, and let me go back again. That's my problem. I think I'll just, I cannot show you constantly all this. Okay, that's probably, okay, sorry. This is the Philippine GNI per capita. And just like what I've told you, that's the gross national income converted to US dollars divided by the income of everyone. And for 2021, 3,640. You would see, say, for example, in the 70s, in the 80s, we have a negative GNI. You can look at this later if you would be interested. I could share with you these links, but this is how it has been fluctuating and increasing throughout the years. Of course, during the pandemic, it dipped to 3,430, but pre-pandemic is 3,850. That's the gross national income. Now, let me just shift back again. Okay. Now, GDP actually is this gross national income would be a good quantitative parameter of what makes a nation rich or poor. But just like what I've said, it's a standard economic measure. It's per capita divided by, meaning to say it's per person divided by the total market value of everything produced in a nation in a year, divided by the number of people in a nation. So more population means lower per capita income. But per capita income, the one that you have seen a while ago, 3,640, doesn't tell us everything we need to know about our country. For instance, is that it does not measure things that are not sold in the market, such as leisure time, religious faith, or strong families. Or even what Brother Rex was describing last time, the ability to, or the vulnerability to disasters. It's not reflected there, but although it has been mentioned that the poor are the more vulnerable to the hazards that Brother Rex was discussing last week. Per capita, but it is the best numerical measure of whether a country is rich or poor, but it does not tell us of the distribution of income. There's this $3,640. It doesn't say that, where's my $3,000? I don't get it. Or you may say, I think my salary is more than $3,000 or $3,600 a year. That's per capita. So the distribution is not seen there, whether a large people share the wealth or whether the wealth is just concentrated in the hands of a few people. So you may be thinking, would the Cs, the Ayalas, and the Villars only have $3,000? Of course, no. The answer is a definite no. But we know that this is just the average income of everyone. So we'll just be using these economic parameters to say whether or describe whether a country is rich or poor. And in that case, let's look at this situation again, just to describe the economies of, that's the, I think this one. Okay, this one. This is the per capita, GDP per capita of the world. But I just want to show you just real quick, we won't go over them one by one. Say you can see Afghanistan is just, this is the GDP, adjusted GDP. This is a World Bank information, 1,665. That's, of course, very low. If we just fast forward to Philippines, of course, you will be happy that we're more than 1,600. It's 8,892.8. That's the adjusted GDP for 2021. But of course, if we compare ourselves, say with, you would say, well, Sri Lanka, which have an economic meltdown, was 14,000 last 2021, but it doesn't describe the average Sri Lankan then. But if you look at, say, Thailand, I miss it, it's 18,000. So it's more 10,000 more than us. So mas mayaman pala yung pinuntahang bansa ni ating missionary, Brother Mark. Of course, if you look at, say, the United States, it's $69,000. And you can just use, even Ukraine is $4,000. And if you would look at, say, how they are clustered, that $8,000, we're just in the border of the lower middle income. So that's how Philippines would be described. So let's return back again. Okay. So what was the Philippines do to move from the lower middle income to the target of the president to become an upper middle income country? So this is what we're supposed to discuss. And the simple answer would be to increase the total amount of goods and services that it produces, which means there will be more to go around. The goal would be to increase the nation's GDP, because as we have seen, countries are defined, rich countries are defined by the gross domestic product. And the richer the country is, the higher the domestic product. That's what we have seen. The Philippines were just in the lower middle income. And if we want really to increase our status to an upper middle income, we have to increase our GDP. And how do we increase the Philippines' GDP? The answer is very complex. Just like what I've told you, there would be 78 steps or factors. And this could either be a positive, stated in a positive sense or in a negative sense. But that would be the main thesis of this book. So in fact, please keep attending our Sunday school here, because we'll be try to finish this book, Lord willing. But the point here really is we really need to increase the GDP so that there will be more goods and services that will be available in the marketplace. And that's the effort that we should exert into to overcome poverty, because by having much of this goods and services going around, And then, of course, you would be asking later, don't ask me, but I'll be answering that already. How would it be distributed equitably? There should be that economic freedom. But the point is, we should produce more and more goods and services so that we can get out of the poverty level. So to succeed in poverty, Philippines must be willing to examine its official policies, laws, economic structures, cultural values, and even traditions to see whether they promote or restrain the increase in goods and services that the Philippines produce. So there's quite a lot. Laws, policies, economic structures, cultural values, even spiritual values and traditions. Because all of this would have its impact or influence in the production of goods and services. So the goal must be clear, and that is to produce more goods. Because if the goal is not clear, then it's a moving target. We can never achieve what we want to achieve. Other goals have been suggested to address poverty. Internationally, they would say, give more aid. But giving more aid is not a sustainable solution. We're looking for a sustainable solution. It will just be a short-term relief. And of course, we'll talk more about this. In fact, that would be described more in detail. I'll give you more examples of this. But suffice it to say at this point in time that giving more aid, and this history has proven this, in many nations in other parts of the world have not helped them get out of the pits of poverty. Next would be, this is something that many people are saying, more equal distribution of wealth. Let's tax those rich people. Those billionaires should pay more. Or the wealth should be redistributed from the rich to the poor. And they were saying that if there would be this economic equality, then we will have this so-called social justice, and everybody will be happy. But actually coercing people to give out their hard-earned wealth for people who are not even worthy to receive it is more injustice. In fact, Brother Rex was talking the other day to me when we were on our way to one of the offices that in this world there will never be perfect equality. Whether you like it or not, we can invoke that we want to have equality, but what the point here is we should have a level playing field so that we can produce more goods and services. If one family in the Philippines or only a few families in the Philippines are able to economically produce their wealth to the disadvantage of other people, that is not economic freedom. And that is not what we are trying to achieve here. The good example here of wealth distribution will be in communist countries. We know that in communist countries, government coerce everyone to give up their wealth, and everybody would just be wearing the same pajamas, pants, and shirt, and everybody would be riding the same bicycles. Nobody would be allowed to drive a BMW, or just everybody would just be riding the same carretela or sled. You're not allowed to wear your Rolex watch or some fancy jewelry. You will not be awarded any incentive for your hard work, and that's not. And definitely, that's not economic freedom. And that's not what we want. The goal really is to produce more goods and services, but there is this economic freedom to do it, not equality. We'll talk more about that when we talk about the free market. Natural resources, that's another good argument that we should explore those natural resources that we have. We've done that. We have overexploited our forest resources. Now we're eyeing the West Philippine Sea for possible oil and maybe minerals, and that's where the possible next World War III may happen, because there's a lot of
natural resource there that China, the big bully, is doing, trying to shoo away all those people that's trying to claim those resources. But that's correct in a way. If you discover minerals, resources, it would help because it would produce goods and services. But at the same time, if it will not be sustained, it could be even a curse. In fact, in forestry, because, well, of course, because of so many wrong policies and even some corruption, we have overexploited already our forests. I think definitely you've heard Brother Rex talking about that previously. So it became a curse that now we have so much of our resources destroyed, because back in the 60s and 70s, we just exported our logs, not the finished product. In some sense, we could make use of natural resources, but it's not sustainable, but we have to depend on other things, so it's not everything. Other suggestions? Oh, sorry. Debt forgiveness. Well, it's just the same as aid, but it's at best, it is best as a means to an end, meaning to say helping other countries produce more goods and services. But it shouldn't be the goal to have debt forgiveness. Better trade terms, of course, if we consider exports, import, we would want better prices. But of course, definitely this is the idea of any entrepreneur, to have better prices whenever they would be trading, because if we try to look at the export trade, the exports would contribute much to our GDP, but if we import more, that would be deducted. But as we know, it's very difficult, and in fact, it's almost impossible that a small, poor country would be able to dictate the price of their goods to other countries. So it will not be a good goal to pursue. We can try to exert it diplomatically, but it's not the goal that we would to achieve poverty reduction. Restrain multinational companies. They would say, oh, these multinational companies, Nestle, then of course, remember Bayer's, it's an NMS multinational company. Restrain them. But actually, if they're doing good practices to produce goods and services, why restrain them? If they're doing unfair labor practices, we should restrain them. But if they're doing good labor practices to produce goods and services, they should be assisted. This fair trade coffee, which the idea simply is designed to promote the interests of small coffee producers. They would be saying to help these small coffee producers, but we know that whenever we invoke this, you would say, don't buy Starbucks. Doon ka sa drip coffee. Kasi Starbucks is not patronizing the small coffee farmers. Drip coffee, I don't know where they're buying their coffee. They might be also buying from other imported brands, but it's not really helping the small farmers, because as you would know, there would be all this middleman, and in fact, it's probably the middleman who will be the culprit for why we have very high prices of onions. So the main goal really, the main goal really is to produce more goods and services, and that's the idea really. That's the goal that we should be achieving, and of course, that's the question that we want to ask. Let's just look at this very simple illustration. Suppose a woman has this $5, let's use dollars because it contributes to that GDP. $5 worth of cloth, or $3, let's say $3 worth of cloth. If that woman just used that cloth as a rug in her house, it's no value or no contribution to the wealth. But if that woman would sew a shirt and convert that $3 worth of cloth into a $20 worth of shirt, that woman contributes $20 into the GDP. So the GDP I checked for the Philippines in 2021 is 394 billion US dollars, let's just round it off, $400 billion. So this woman has contributed $20 to the $4 billion. So it becomes $4 billion and $4 billion and $20. So that's the contribution to GDP. Or we can have a barren piece of land, 2 hectares, 3 hectares, 4 hectares. If the farmer will not use it to produce any crops, there is zero contribution to GDP. But if the farmer cultivates it, just like our song, and just like what our farmer entrepreneur brother was saying, he plants his field and of course leave everything to God, but of course does maintenance work. And it produces, say, $400 worth of crops. That farmer contributed $400 to the GDP. So the GDP becomes, together with the woman, $4,420. So, and if you divide it with the population, the per capita income in the Philippines increases. So there is a contribution to the wealth of the country. Of course, that's using it the numerical value. And we'll talk about how it will be distributed. So that's the amazing process of creating value that did not exist before. A piece of cloth or a barren land. And of course, you can think of some other things, how we can create value. Transfer of goods from one person to another does not increase GDP. Of course, in the Bible it says, Luke 3:13, if you have 2 tunics or coat, if you give the other coat to somebody else, that's a good deed. But in the realm of economics, in the realm of GDP, if you donate something to somebody, to another person, that is a good Samaritan's work, good Christian value work, but it doesn't pull that person out of poverty. It would help him or her protect himself during the cold or to protect the naked body, but it doesn't help him or her get out of poverty. It doesn't contribute to the GDP. And probably you know this, printing money does not increase GDP. You can have a photocopier or all those, well, I'm not talking about fake money, but the government can just simply print money. But what is money? Money is a simple instrument of exchange. In itself, that piece of paper is of no value if the government will not guarantee the value. You can take out your beautiful $1,000 bill. Anong tawag na nga dun sa ating bagong pera ngayon? What do you call that paper bill? The new paper bill? It sounds very expensive, but in itself, it's just a paper and there won't be any value to it. The government can just print and print money. It can print, say, another $4 trillion of money, but if there is no corresponding wealth that is attached to that piece of paper, it's just paper. It's useless. So that's not creating wealth. In fact, printing more money is inflationary. You've learned that in your macroeconomics. So how can a nation create more goods and services? That is, if we keep our focus on the goal, and that is producing more goods and services. That really is the question. And say, for example, in the woman, how can the woman produce more shirt if she's just using a small, poor machine? The government could help them have better machines to produce. The farmer could be given better machines to cultivate their farm so that they can produce more. They could have good access to credit and all those things. We can enumerate them, and many of you, I'm sure, knows them. But the point is, what would be those factors that would promote the production of goods and services? Okay, some examples of countries that have become prosperous by producing more goods and services. Britain. In 1770 to 1870, that's the start of the Industrial Revolution. Britain was able to discover this machine that spin raw cotton to thread, and other machines that could weave cotton threads, and they could make cotton fabric. which was not present before. And out of that, Britain was able to generate wealth because cotton clothes then was very expensive. But now, of course, everybody wants to have cotton fabric. My wife specifically told me when I asked about to buy her a dress sometime, make sure it's cotton. So I keep asking the person because I really don't know. I just try to feel whether it's cotton. I asked the seller, is this cotton? Is this cotton? Yeah, 100% cotton. Okay. So I'll buy it. And we want this. And we know that the Industrial Revolution has caused so much of the production of this, say in this case, cotton fabrics, or even Japan. That's another nation that has grown prosperous. Japan is mainly agricultural. It doesn't have much natural resource, although it has better forests than the Philippines now. They have very good fisheries resources. But what did Japan concentrated in later when the Industrial Revolution caught up on them? They produced better cars, much better than the American cars, so that the American cars, Chrysler, Ford, was sold much lesser compared to Toyota and Honda in the U.S. You can see most of the Americans driving the Japanese cars. Of course, the Americans car are trying to catch up. And we know that Japan has also produced so much electronics, computers, and all those electronic products. And that really helped them. I remember I saw in my notes TV. Of course, we know that Sony was a common household name for very good TVs then. But now we have even Samsung and LG. And of course, we have other nations like South Korea, who has joined the band of nations producing more. South Korea in the 1950s was racked with the Korean War. And, but after that, they have their industries developing more products, cars. They're even into shipbuilding and computers. And even China, which was, we know, a communist country, has loosened up its market to become more or less something like a free market. And what do we know? Many of our electronic products, you can just look at your iPhone or maybe your phone or the electronic chip that you may have. It's made in China. Or you can even look at just simple plastic wares or toys, and it's all made in China. So much consumer goods produced in China. Of course, South Korea, we have mentioned that, or even Taiwan. It's a very small country, but it's producing semiconductors and a lot of electronic products. And they're prosperous. Hong Kong, of course, is another good example. It's a colony, a British colony, and yet no natural resources, just a very good harbor, and they have very good strategic location. And what do you have? It's a major business commercial hub because of the services that it offers. And you can think of other countries. Now, the biblical support for creating more goods and services. Of course, we know the excellent wife, and you can just look at the room for our excellent wives. In Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 31, she is described as making linen garments, selling these linen garments, being a merchant herself. And these are products that could increase the GDP of Israel. And we know that Israel is really a rich country as well. She produces agricultural products. She plants a vineyard. She goes to the marketplace where she could trade. She has her merchandise. You can find that in Proverbs 10:31. The way that this very enterprising, excellent woman, mother, has exhibited, and we know that this is a biblical support for creating goods and services. Genesis is very, very clear about the role of man Adam, and of course, that is also a command to us, was told to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion. And with this divine fiat or commandment to Adam and Eve, they were able to discover, because they could use all those fruits and plants in the Garden of Eden, and they discovered so much agricultural products. We have so much agricultural products now. It's only man that knows how to domesticate these products. Rice wasn't domesticated then. You can ask Brother Glenn, our rice geneticist, on how rice was domesticated. It was a wild plant then, but now it's domesticated, and so with corn and other vegetables, and so with the other animals. And this was part of the divine mandate, and it's so clear. And this divine mandate has made us or commanded us to be very creative. That's why we are able to create computers. We're able to create machines that would, just like the machine that the British invented to spin better thread and cotton fabrics, to sew them better. And of course, we have all these machines around us that help us do our tasks, these computers, these projectors, your cars, the bicycles, motorcycles. All of this is part of this creation mandate given in the Garden of Eden for us to be really be creative. There's also this other biblical text, Genesis 2:15, when the Lord took man and put him in the garden to work it and keep it. And that's what we are doing ever since. Each of us have our own vocation. We are really created in the image of man. We see that in Genesis as well. And among all those creation, it's only man that has this unique ability, like our great God, to create things. You cannot find an ant creating a building just like this one, or a house. The ants have been through all these centuries burrowing in their mound. Yun ang tahanan ng mga ants or termites, or even the rabbits, or even the bees. They have their beehives. But you can see that man has created palaces, different kinds of houses. And rabbits, they eat grass. But man, we can have a gourmet. Our excellent wives would prepare a delicious bulalo or sinigang or tinola and all this kind of gourmet food. But there's no such thing as rabbit gourmet or kangaroo gourmet. So this creative ability is given to man, and that's why we are tasked to really create more goods and services. That's it. Man created in the image of God. And of course, we are given the commandment, you shall love your neighbors yourself. By creating goods and services, we are able to help other people as well. And the example, our Lord Jesus Christ worked as a carpenter, although it's not really clear how he did that task, but he was mentioned as a carpenter in Mark 6:3. Paul was a tent maker to support himself. And these are examples of Christians, even God himself, doing tasks. And of course, we anticipate that the new heaven and the new earth, I think Brother Rex described this previously, that we shall still be working. We still have our vocation. I don't know how we will be doing our tasks then, but I think it's probably better to be operating in a sinless, holy heaven and earth, doing our own particular vocation. So this comes to the last question: what goods and services can the Philippines create? We should not think that we can never create or invent automobiles better than the Germans. Of course, you say, oh, the Germans could produce that excellent Mercedes-Benz or BMW, but Philippines, we can do that. Or we can never say that we cannot be better in electronics than Japan. Doing nothing is a big mistake. And in fact, it's really accepting that we are defeated, that we shall forever be a poor country. We shouldn't think about that. We should think of the principle of comparative advantage that says no person or no country can make everything. So there will be always something that we can produce and earn a profit. There is something that we can produce that other countries could not. And there will be a niche for this, whatever product or service we may provide. Another important thing is that human beings have limited needs, but they have unlimited wants. Who would think back when we were still students at UPLB in the 70s that there would be these so-called smartphones? We were just contented then with our cassette tape recorders, recording the lectures that we have with our teachers. I remember when I was doing my PhD, I was just using a small cassette recorder to record the lecture of my teacher. But now we have all these smartphones that could have live videos even as well. Also, so there's this unlimited wants, and therefore we can produce other wealth or products. Also, we should consider or think of traditional products. Most countries realize that many traditional products, such as arts and crafts, could be produced, but over the centuries, that's not something to sustain economic growth. Hindi kaya yaman doon. Although, of course, there will be these art collectors, but that's just for a few. Let's not only think of traditional products. We may be thinking that of these traditional products, but if there's insufficient demand, law of supply and demand, therefore, you cannot get good price. But if the products would have good demand, then you can have good price. What the government should do is to create the right conditions for innovation and entrepreneurship to happen in a free market system. We'll talk about that free market system later as we even compare market systems around the world, but that's one of the tasks that the government should do. And we should not surrender that the Philippines would forever be a poor country. And of course, we should not just think, we just follow what the government says, what to produce, but we could be innovative. The government should support innovations and provide this fertile ground or very favorable environment for such a free market to thrive. And with that, we can have some comments or questions. Some brothers who are experts in economics can share their thoughts or ideas, or you can ask some questions. While waiting for questions, wala pang questions, I could show you the poverty data in the Philippines. Let me just mirror it again. There you go. So this is the poverty data in the Philippines. National poverty line, number of poor, 19.9 million. This is 2021. Poverty rate is 18.1. That's data worldbank.org. Okay? So, while waiting for some other questions, so I'm trying to show. Oh, okay, there's the question, Sister Tina.
Good morning. Thank you, Deacon Ike, for the lesson on poverty of nations. You mentioned that in Genesis, it is God's command that man should subdue the world. So it speaks of stewardship. But then, man being depraved.
Ikaw ang sasagot niya. And it's okay. Sorry. Naiingi ka.
Balik kasi kuya, yung naging causes of poverty is that rich oppress the poor, and those rich countries hoard the riches of us poor countries, and even to the point of exploitation. Philippines, I believe, is also one of the exploited countries in the world. And so sabi mo, more production of goods and services. But then, even though we are producing goods and services, and yet meron ding pagkukulang, may kulang pa rin on how to produce goods and services. So yung China is one of the countries na nakita natin na they are advanced and what do you call that? Ano sila? Prosperous.
Yan,
Being
number
a
two.
communist
Number two na
country.
sila, oh.
Number 2. So, justifiable ba yun na because they are equally distributing yung kanilang economic growth sa lahat? Pwedeng gano'n na din yung gawin ng marami as a pattern for us to be prosperous also.
Maraming tanong si Sister Tina. Exploitation of natural resources. I think I'll pass that to our expert on natural resources, Dr. Rex Cruz. Pakibigay naman ng mic, please. Overexploitation daw, Dr. Cruz. I'll refer to the expert, of course. Bakit daw naging cause of poverty pa nga?
Yeah,
He knows a lot about that.
hindi ako expert. No, yung poverty, yung poverty kasi as what you presented, it's an issue really of distribution of opportunities, opportunities to the ability to capture development opportunities or opportunities to create income. Doon nagkakaproblema doon tayo nagkakaproblema, and but the reality is marami nang nauna. Yung mga nauna, they tend to capture more and more of the opportunities, that that those who started with little ability to capture opportunities, lalong wala nang makapture na opportunity. So yun yung ako ang tingin ko yun yung isang major factor why there are poor people. They are not able to capture opportunities to create income, and sige, sabihin ko na rin, yung kanina banggit kasi yung equality, yung equality, dalawang bagay yan, equality and equity. Pag sinabi mong equality, pag sinabi mong equality and referring to the capture of opportunities, pag equality yan, you give everybody equal access, in other words, they have equal access to opportunities, so kung halimbawa ako, I can access from the bank 1 million pesos as a capital, dapat maski na yung lahat ng tao, dapat may access to capital, na 1 million pesos. So lahat tayo dapat pwedeng mangutang ng gano'n, to start up our business. That's equality. But is that realistic? Is that pragmatic? At all? Balikan ko mamaya yan. Equity. Equity is giving everyone, giving the appropriate resources, as needed and as able, to handle and manage. Parang parang bibigyan kita kung kaya mo. Pero pag hindi mo kaya, hindi kita bibigyan ng, I'll give you only as much as you are able to manage and create values out of. Now, yung equality, yan ang masama sa land reform, Yung land reform kasi, binigay na equal yan sa mga farmers. But the farmers don't have equal ability to capture opportunities from the lands given to them, Merong marunong mag-manage, merong hindi marunong mag-manage, merong may capital, merong walang capital, And so, yun ang problema ng land reform, Gusto nila lahat pare-pareho, ito may lupa kayo, ganito. But not everybody or most everybody don't have the ability to manage and make their lands productive yung nagawa nila. So what happened? Marami diyan sa mga nagkakuha ng lupa sa land reform, nabenta na yan, no? Nabenta na yan, no? Nabenta na yan. And that's the the fallacy of equality, no? Pero yung equity, bigyan lang kita, ano bang kaya mo i-manage, no? Ano bang kaya mong i-manage? Okay? Now, if you are, if you're not able to manage and gusto mo ng ganito, this is what you need. You have to get all these assets, ready. You have to learn, you have to study, you have to develop the skills that can be also the duty of the government, no? So magsasucceed lang sana yung land reform kung yung gobyerno did its best, no, to develop the capacity ng mga binigyan nila ng lupa to manage it, no. But the problem is, they were not able to do that, no. Hindi sila nagbigay ng mga, they did not give the right access to capital, no. Pati yung mga access nila to technical services, wala din yan, et cetera, et cetera. So maraming naging there were so many, sorry for our friends, no. I forgot all about you, So what I'm saying is, if you want to give equal opportunities to everyone, develop equal abilities, no, which I find very difficult to operationalize, no. So yun lang muna, no. But you're right, no. Overexploitation is a problem because overexploitation is capturing opportunities for yourself, no. And not leaving, none to others. Parang it's just like the yung I don't know the exact reference of verse, yung sino bang nagsabi do not harvest everything, leave something for the gleaners.
Gleaning.
Oo. So and that's the principle, we have to be very sensitive, that even if we can capture all the opportunities, do not, you have to leave out something for the others, no? And that is, of course, loving others as yourself. That's I think. Yan lang muna.
Okay, this is the lag export. I was able to grab it from my lecture notes while our expert was talking about land reform as well. Sabi ko sa inyo, maraming expert yan, pati sa agrarian reform. But you can see there very clearly that in the 60s and 70s, our lag export, lugs, troso, the lugs, the raw lugs, not processed wood, was the major export. In fact, I think I did the dollar earning. Oh, the dollar earning is over there on the other side. Only a few people who have lagging concession. And I think this is what also Brother Rex was saying, who have been favored to receive this lagging concession, were the one really reaping all these dollars back then. But as you can see later, towards the 80s, 90s, wala na tayong lag export. In fact, we're importing much of our wood now. So it's a natural resource, overexploited, but only a few people who have good favor from the government was able to access this wealth. So that's just an example in the field of forestry. And probably maybe Brother Glenn can talk about that in the field of agriculture. But you were asking about, say, China, their model. They loosen up their communist ideology so that they can accommodate a free capital scheme. But it doesn't mean that the wealth of the Chinese are still equally distributed. You can go to China, if you have been to China, you would see that some people are driving Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and some people are just riding their bicycles. The inequality is still there. In fact, the utopian state of the communist countries have never been achieved. And it will never be achieved because equality could not be achieved here. So Brother Rex was talking about the economic freedom. So that's what the authors, the theologian Barry or rather Wayne Grudem and the economist Barry Asimus was talking about, there should be this economic freedom accessible to all the people equally. So if there would be a favored family or group or sectors only in the society who could be economically access the wealth of the country, or rather the natural resources, or even certain sectors of the economy, or the laws would favor them. There would be laws that sometimes, because many of this family might be sitting in the Congress, and they would provide laws that is inimical to other people. So the wealth will not be distributed fairly. Well, we're not talking about really equal distribution of wealth, because that would never be achieved. What we want, what the authors were saying, is just the equitable access. Brother Rex was telling us about everybody should have this access depending upon their ability. Some people would be really good businessmen. I'm a poor, miserable person when it comes to business. I can't do that. That's why I'm just an employee. I'm a professor. So I'm not an entrepreneur. There would be some who would be enterprising here. Not yet down. Okay, Brother Ike.
Thought lang regarding yung question ni Sister Tina. No? If we come to look at it, yung poverty, alam natin, we have foreigners here. No? When it comes to poverty, we know that it will never be eliminated. If you look at the scriptures itself, it's there. Okay? But this has a purpose. Okay? Well, first, the bottom line of all this, as we know, is depravity of man. And what that drives the greed that happens, that's why this inequality happens. But if you look at it, maybe you will wonder, then many would say God is unfair because there are still a lot of miserable people who are still poor. But if you look at it in the biblical context, like for example, if I may cite Ephesians 3:22, there's a context there. Imagine if there is no poverty, no one would work on the down level. Everyone would be, let's say, living in a very good conditions. Who would work? And the world will not function well. So meaning they have their own roles, but at the same time, it can also be the purpose of God. That's why there is what you call the authority and the submission thing. If you refer to Ephesians and of course Colossians 3:18-22, you see the structure there: wives, submit to husband, husband love your wife, and then father, children, submit to your parents. But there it was emphasized, bondservants, obey your masters, masters be fair with your slaves. The point here is it establishes the social order. So that's why, though it's not wrong to pray for poverty to be eliminated, but it's there. And what drives poverty is the injustice that is driven by greed. We know that the powerful takes what they want, and then of course, many slaves, or let's say the workers, many protest because they want more. And you see that they don't meet halfway. And this is the reality that is happening. So I just added a thought based on how the scriptures presented it. But the beauty there is that's why God reminded it, importance of the slaves or those of the subordinates to obey their masters. But by the wisdom of God, He balances it that masters respect or be fair with your slaves or with your workers. Just my thought.
Thank you, Brother Ike. So, various roles that we have in society. We cannot all be managers. There's got to be the laborer. Of course, just a free preview, no? Just like what I've told you, there are 78 factors. And this is just an example, the nation's economic system, no? Of course, the nation's government, that's another chapter. The nation's freedom, so that's where we talk about really freedom. And freedom is discussed extensively. The nation's values, so so those are, we will cover them, God willing, in this Sunday school lesson. But we're just doing it one pace. Nagpe-pacing lang tayo, just looking at certain points. Yes, Sister Patricia.
Hello po. Good morning, Tito Ike. We have a couple of inputs po or thoughts from some brethren sa Zoom. First of all, kay Pastor po, he says, "It is true that the rich nations oppress the poor nations, including the Philippines. But that is only because of the collaboration of self-interested people of the oppressed nations. African slavery is an example. The untold story is that Africans were sold out to slavery by their fellow African lords. This is true of economic oppression. Many Filipinos sell out national interests to foreigners at the expense of their national patrimony. A good model is Vietnam. None is more destroyed by American power in the 20th century. But today, Vietnam is bypassing the Philippines economically. The explanation is their national patriotism in economics. Sadly, that is very much lacking in our country. Even the so-called militants are leading foreign product patronizers. The difference between equality and equity is ideological. Equity is the mantra of the woke and progressive ideology of America. Equality is right. When applied to economics, it means equality of opportunity. Equity is more socialist. Applied to economics, it means sameness of outcome regardless of work. Equity in its socialist terms is bad for the production of goods and services because it disincentivizes work. It makes for a slothful people. Additionally, he says, poverty in scriptures is explained in three ways. 1, sloth, requiring repentance. 2, calamity, requiring benevolence. And 3, oppression, requiring empowerment. And then we have another forwarded thought here, I believe, from Sister Eileen Lapitan. She says, as Christians, I believe it is good that we talk about the importance of helping promote economic welfare. Christians can indeed use our voices in these discussions to point people to biblical values of stewardship. How can we caution ourselves from heavily focusing on working toward numbers like GDP, which can come at the expense of other aspects of welfare, like healthy mental well-being, peace, etc.? So I think that was a question.
I think thank you for what Pastor has earlier mentioned, and of course, I just say is very correct. Philippines GDP is 8,892. Pastor mentioned about Vietnam. I think I have to show you also Vietnam so that you can see how much Vietnam is doing. It's 11,000. So Vietnam is really fairly doing well in terms of GDP. Okay. The question on mental health and other aspects.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, GDP doesn't really. I think I was very clear at the start that GDP doesn't capture things like leisure time. It doesn't capture even human mental well-being. It's not part of that. I even mentioned that even the preparedness for disaster is not reflected in the GDP, as Brother Rex was giving me the assignment that I'll be mentioning that. But I'll just have to say that just like what you've said, the poor are the more vulnerable when it comes to disaster. GDP doesn't show that. So it's just an economic parameter. So of course, yes, there would be this other important aspect. In fact, it was very clear that even in the book it says material prosperity and all this GDP stuff is just a secondary issue. What we want really would be a holistic development. But that's not the focus of this. But of course, we've been mentioning some scriptural references when it comes to helping the poor, all those kind of things. But that aspect about well-being, particularly mental, that will be taken care of by other lessons. So it's not the scope of GDP to reflect that. So that's of course very clear. But of course, Sister Eileen was alluding that also mentioned, I mean, that we should be responsible also in effecting the correct policies and environment that in fact we'll be seeing later in the future in this book or in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you po.
It's 5 minutes before 12, so if there are no more questions. Oh, Brother Glenn, may comments?
Just a quick, doon lang sa, this is a very broad, daming kwento dito, kanya-kanyang idea. That's why we have politics because sino nakaupo siya ang magde-decide anong solution doon. But I'm just answering yung cute question ni Tina about overexploitation or exploitation. At pinakita ni Ike doon yung laging ganun. So, same sa principle sabi ni Ike na pag binenta mo yung cloth na hindi mo ginawang clothes, ang hina ng sa economy nun. If we have that log, in-exploit natin, pinutol natin, but ginawa natin plywood, ginawa natin dito, prenases, yun ang tumaas ang value. Baka umangat tayong kaunti. Of course, the most important is money should circulate. Sometimes, if we save too much, if we will not circulate the money, bababa din ang poverty din yon kasi walang nagkakasweldo. So invest, but the bad thing is the double curse is sometimes in other countries they do the corruption at nilalabas sa bansa. That's the double. Minsan sa ibang bansa, yan Tagalog ko na para hindi lang maintindihan. Sa ibang bansa, they corrupt but umiikot pa rin ang pera sa loob ng bansa nila kagaya ng other countries. Ikot pa rin ang ikot ng pera. Purang pumunta from one pocket to the other pockets yan kasi ini-invest nila. But once you put it out, that's the double poverty natin. Small aspect lang yan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brother Glenn.
And if you, last for agriculture naman, put value. Hindi lang magbenta ka ng kamatis, gawin mo siyang ketchup para maging may value addition. Pag iba nang gumawa ng ketchup, hindi na ibang bansa na, babalik sa iyo. We are selling our plywood or our log sa labas. Pagbalik i-finish, bibili mo na sa IKEA, ay tayo na logi doon. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Brother Glenn. That's really still macroeconomics. And of course, there will be this very interesting discussion on really how is pencil made. I'll tell you about that story later. It's in one of the lessons. And you'll just be amazed at how a product comes into being. And in fact, there's no discussion on how these products would be made. But there's this effort on many sectors really interacting to produce various products. And that really what's create value. And that's what Brother Glenn was saying. How could we really create value? More value, because more value means higher GDP. But of course, it doesn't mean the higher GDP is not really, although that's the measure, creating more goods and services. That's just the measure, but although that's the goal, but that will not ultimately be reflected for everybody. In fact, just like what I've said, there would be the other factors, as we shall be seeing, particularly on how this wealth will be distributed per capita. No more. I think it's 12 noon, so we have to close in prayer. So let's close in prayer. Our great God and Father, we are definitely appalled and disturbed by massive poverty around us, and we know that there are many cases or situations or conditions that have caused this poverty. But we know that God has allowed such things to happen for various reasons that we may not be able to understand. And it's just so complex. But as we tackle this topic on finding a sustainable solution for poverty of nations, we pray that indeed we as Christians in our own respective roles would be able to influence our society, even the environment where we are moving around, so that we can contribute meaningfully in minimizing poverty, for we know that in this world, poverty will never be eliminated. And so, dear Father, as we have received admonitions from the Holy Scriptures, we pray that indeed your people would have benefited and would follow your commandment. Thank you, dear Father, for this time and this lesson. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.